Hi everybody, welcome to my introductory reading of my book, Surviving This Year and Beyond with God. This is going to be a bittersweet story of the times we're living now, namely the end time. But before we start, I'd like to share a story of something that happened in the Atlantic Ocean in the early 1900s. On April 14th, 1912, a large passenger ship, here it is, traversed the North Atlantic Ocean en route to New York City. At 11:40 p.m., the ship hit a massive iceberg, which left a 300-foot gash on the right side of the ship, and the giant steamliner began to swallow huge amounts of water. And I guess you guessed it by now, it was the Titanic. Oh, it's right there. The biggest and most luxurious ship ever constructed. At 2:20 a.m. of the following day, the Titanic had sunken down below the surface of the water. The inconceivable, the ship that had been declared to be unsinkable had gone down to the bottom of the ocean in less than 4 hours. The sinking of the Titanic is a drastic situation that came on so suddenly, boom, that the captain and his crew were caught totally unprepared. They were not able to respond quickly enough to avoid the serious consequences and loss of life that resulted. To its 2,400 passengers, only 606 survived. How sad. Now, I have written this book right here because of the urgent situation that is happening worldwide, which is similar to the Titanic story because it happens suddenly, boom. So suddenly will the end time events come upon us that many will not expect it and will not be ready. So this book is a warning. It calls to all, be on guard, be prepared. At this late hour, we can be lackadaisical, drinking our martinis, or dazing off into la la land. We are living in probably the most urgent moment in world history. And you can see what it is. It's happening all around you. Beginning with the pandemic, the economic crises, the horrific weather around the world, the Ukraine war, and now the Hamas-Israeli war. We are now in the crosshairs of an invisible enemy that seeks to destroy, kill, or hurt us any way he can. The thief has come to kill, steal, and destroy. But I'm come that you might have life, and that you might have it more abundantly. Words from Jesus, from John 10:10. So get ready. Get ready as our journey takes us over rough, tough terrain. But it will be worth it to endure the stormy trek, because at the end, we'll be rewarded with a rainbow of beautiful events that will take your breath away. Yes. Okay. So, here we go. We'll go to the book itself now. And you can get a copy, your own copy on Amazon. I'm not going to read all the episodes, but I will read some, just hit on a few. And then for those that want the whole enchilada, you'll have to get the book. So, episode 1. Now, a little preface here. A long time ago, Satan tried to pull off a coup d'etat in heaven, but he wanted to take over the throne of God. He was jealous of God, and he wanted the throne. He wanted it all. But the archangel Michael was sent out to fight against him, and Michael defeated him. And after he was defeated, he was thrown down to the earth. Okay, So here we go. Episode 1, the invisible warfare. Yes, we are seeing the horrible tragedies of the pandemic, the Hamas-Israeli war, the extreme global weather, but the real warfare behind these tribulations is in the invisible realm. You can't see it, but it's there. And there appeared in heaven. Let's take a look at what's happening in the invisible realm. And there appeared in heaven a great red dragon who stood before the woman. The woman was in labor, ready to have her baby. And the dragon who stood before her wanted to devour her child as soon as it was born. Revelation 3:4. The dragon in this dramatic imagery is none other than Satan himself. He is fuming. He is angry because he's just got kicked out of heaven and cast down to earth. Revelation 12:7, 8, and 9. The babe that was born of the woman is the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And he is the cause of anger from the devil, all because of the kingship promised to Jesus, that he would rule the nations with a rod of iron. Revelation 12:5. Then an angel warns the inhabitants. Okay, are we on the right page? Yep. Then an angel warns the inhabitants of the earth to watch out for this hideous entity because he is furious. Remember, Satan got kicked out of heaven. He's coming down to earth. And angels warn the inhabitants, watch out, look who's coming. This hideous entity is coming because he is furious, knowing that he only has a short time to carry out his evil work on earth. And I think it's only going to be 3.5 years, the worst part of it. But overall, I think he's going to be ruling over the earth for 7 years. Okay. But he vents his greatest fury at the woman and goes to make war against her and the remnant of her seed. Revelation 12:17. So the script above is a symbolic portrayal of the cosmic warfare waging behind the scenes since the beginning of time, a foreshadowing of the Ukraine-Russian-US war, the pandemic, and even the extreme weather phenomenon that is punishing the earth at this very moment. I highlighted this in episode 2 of my book, Return of the King of Kings. There I revealed the correlation between the Horsemen of Apocalypse and the present evils that have invaded our lives and our planet. Okay, in the book I have some rhetorical characters to enhance the reading. Here Sam asks a question. This is all very interesting, but what does the biblical concept of this woman have to do with me? I mean, I respect all these things that are in Revelation, but I got to get on with my life. Answer. We're all involved in the invisible warfare. Try to see this and understand. Okay? So, we're going to go over to page 5 now. Revelation refers to the remnant seed of the woman. The remnant seed of the woman, that's us, that's Israel, that's all who believe in Jesus Christ. But regardless of the degree of belief in this wonderful deity, God views all of us as that woman depicted in Revelation 12, and therefore we're all involved in the unseen warfare. The unbeliever and those resolute in their rebellion against God, they're also involved. But the enemy specifically seeks to damage and hurt those who are his biggest threat, namely those who are believers and followers of God and his son Jesus. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, we don't want the enemy to have the upper hand. We want to take the offensive. And to do that, we need to know who or what we're fighting and what their strategies are. I will expand further on these themes as we progress through the book. Episode 2. Where are we in this end-time narrative? Knowing where you are in the story is critical to your survival. Quote from John Eldridge from his book, Resilient. When a hurricane is approaching our southern coast off the Gulf of Mexico, an early warning is vital if the population in its path are to survive. The cities in its trajectory need to know the size, the force, intensity of the storm so they can prepare and be ready to face the destructive winds, the flying debris, and the flooding rains. So this is what happened with Hurricane Katrina. Anyone that remembers that, it was a huge hurricane and it came on really fast. There was a lot of damage and lives lost because the government officials failed to prepare and warn the people. Of course, they did warn a little bit and they didn't know how big it was going to be. So sad to say, there was a lot of lives lost. Okay, next theme here, or subtitle, Surviving the End Time Storm. In this episode, we'll cover the current terrain of the Ukraine-Russian and U.S. war and through the prophetic lens of Ezekiel 38 and Revelation. And thus, we will avail ourselves of unique insights and understanding of the present war, the global crises, and their global impact. As we move through the story, we'll begin to get clues as to where we're at in the end time narrative. We'll observe a series of events and signs that will be a wake-up call and to give advance warning of the soon return of Jesus. And the dark days that will precede is coming. We're already living in those dark days, if you haven't noticed. And dear readers, be prepared. As Scripture begins to uncover data that will point to the leader of Russia, Gog, and reveals him as the Antichrist. That's Gog, G-O-G, not God. Gog, and reveals him as the Antichrist. The president of Russia is already exhibiting atrocious hostilities in the Ukraine war. But even this is mild compared to the horrendous acts that he will perform once he takes on the full nature of Antichrist. Okay, here's some footnotes that I put in. Ezekiel 38 talks about Gog and Magog, Gog being the leader of Russia, and Magog being the territory of Russia. In my last book, Ukraine-Russia, Ezekiel 38, War, I explain how Gog is going to be the leader of Russia and who will most likely transform into the Antichrist. God even reveals this in Ezekiel 38. It's a pretty heavy chapter. Okay, next subtitle. The coming of Jesus and the appearance of Antichrist. Okay, here's the question. Why do we have to talk about the Antichrist? Well, my answer is, sadly, the Antichrist is a prominent figure in the Revelation story. Okay, we'll find out more about that as we go on. But of that day and hour, no one knows. Matthew 24:36. This is referring to the return of Jesus. This is what Jesus said concerning his return. So, we may not know the hour or the day of his return, but there is nothing that says we cannot know the times or the season. Later in the book of Luke, Jesus even prompts people to discern, to understand the signs of the times. And here he was pointing to the end time, to his second coming. Luke 12:56. Sam has a question here. Will the man of perdition or Antichrist come before the return of Jesus? Answer. If you study the text carefully, you'll notice that there is a certain sequence to the biblical script. before the second coming of Jesus, there has to be a great falling away from the faith, as well as the morality of society as a whole. And we'll see the appearance of the man of sin, the son of perdition, Antichrist. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Another subtitle, Timing and Significance of God or Antichrist. In episode 1 of my book, Ukraine-Russia and Ezekiel 38 War, I used biblical script to indicate that Gog is the leader of Russia and Magog the territory of Russia. And in episode 3, scripture begins to expose Gog as the Antichrist. Okay, so now we're blown away. All the fog that has been obscuring our timeline map. We know the Antichrist is potentially on the scene there in Russia as the one who is at war with Ukraine and the U.S. The Ezekiel 38 prophetic script brings all this into focus. Okay, so keep in mind also that besides the physical Antichrist, there is also the spirit of Antichrist that's moving about, and he can inhabit anybody at any time, just like in the Matrix. Remember the Matrix? Those agents, the evil agents, could infiltrate people at any moment, and that person would become an agent. Well, that's the way the spirit of Antichrist is. He can infiltrate anybody he wants to do evil things. But the main one who's going to infiltrate in the end time, which is now, is going to be a man, and it's going to be a leader of Russia, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39. Okay, so now we're blowing away the fog that has been obscuring our timeline map. We know the Antichrist is potentially on the scene there in Russia as the one who is at war with Ukraine and the U.S. The Ezekiel 38 prophetic script brings all of this into focus. Now, this is a big, huge clue to show where we're at in the end time narrative. Because remember, after the Antichrist comes the second return of Jesus. And this real-time war between Ukraine, U.S., and Russia is occurring in our present time. Daniel the prophet says the king of the north, Antichrist, will have dominion for seven years. In Daniel, that's in Daniel 9:27. This Antichrist, also known as the beast in Revelation, will rule over the people who are not of God and will declare a mandatory mark or chip be placed on every living person. It's possible this mark has already been put into people's bodies as a nanoparticle through the vaccines and through various other introductory methods. And he caused it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, so that no man might buy or sell save him that has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. This is in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16 and 17. Next page. Remember, we're not going to do the whole book. We're just going to hit on certain specific episodes. The book is written in episodes and not chapters. The Antichrist 7-year peace pact ties into the timing of the pandemic. This peace pact is right there in the Bible. Daniel talks about it, and others talk about it too. So the Antichrist 7-year peace pact ties into the timing of the pandemic. If the pandemic, which began in 2020, is one of the many draconic effects, plagues, and pestilences of the Horsemen of Apocalypse, then this makes known that 2020 is apparently the initiation of the Antichrist 7-year pact. Because, excuse me, because the first horse rider of the apocalypse is the Antichrist. It's the guy riding the white horse. So that's not, don't get it confused, that's not Jesus, that's the Antichrist. So the first horse rider of the apocalypse is the Antichrist. Now, the leader of Russia in 2020 and still today is Putin. So go figure. During the 7-year pact, the Antichrist will lead a one world government. In other words, he's going to rule over the whole world. Power will be given to him over all the world. In episode 7 of the Pandemic Gospel, I point out something very significant about the pandemic and the Antichrist 7-year peace pact. Okay, so don't freak out when we're talking about the Antichrist, having 7 years to dominate everything, because he will come to an end. Jesus will bring him to an end after the 7 years. You'll see how. In episode 7 of the Pandemic Gospel, I point out something very significant about the pandemic and the Antichrist 7-year peace pact. The fact that pandemic protocol could have affected countries on a global scale revealed that such a universal accomplishment could not have succeeded unless a unified league between nations had already been signed and agreed to prior to the pandemic, namely the Antichrist 7-year peace pact. Question from Sam. Oh my God, are you saying Putin is the Antichrist? No, I'm not saying that. But Revelation and Ezekiel scriptures do point to this. So when you see Gog in Ezekiel 38, this is in actuality referring to the Antichrist. I expound on this in the episode The Dark Nature of Gog and Magog in my book, Ukraine-Russian Ezekiel 38 War. But there are also several verses in Ezekiel 38 that point to Gog as the Antichrist. So, don't expect to see a gory monster when the Antichrist manifests. He'll neither have horns nor a pitchfork. He'll probably be wearing a suit and tie and be winning nations with his suave demeanor and flatteries. Okay? So we're going to stop there. We'll continue with part 2. So don't forget to get your copy.